What's up, guys? Today we're going to do a crypto market update to give you guys an idea of what I'm seeing in the crypto markets. So let's go ahead and dive in after a quick disclaimer. All right, let's dig into the crypto markets. Please know that nothing on here is financial advice. Everything here is just for education and informational purposes only. So what I like to do when I dive into the crypto markets is get an idea of the overall trend. So I'll be looking at the total chart, which is just TOTAL, and this will show us the total crypto market by market cap. The actual definition here is the top 150 cryptocurrencies, and they're aggregated by their total market cap. So we can see right now that the total crypto market is sitting at $3.25 trillion. And we can zoom out and look at the crypto market cycles. One thing to note about these crypto market cycles is the structure, right? You have these prolonged downtrends, these flat markets, and then these parabolic moves to the upside. We have our down market, flat market, parabolic move to the upside, and so on and so forth. So taking a look at the total crypto market, let's say all the way down from the last 2 years, if we look at 2024, maybe even a little earlier, let's get an idea of the longer term trend. So let's mark January 2024, and we can start to mark our trend. So overall, the last 2 years of cryptocurrency have been in an uptrend. So you can see here, we have our low, we have our higher low, our higher low. The last higher low was printed here in April 2025. The last high was printed in December 2024. So there hasn't been a market high in 2025 just yet. And we can see here that the market high has been just below, and that was at May 2025. So we are in this 2-year uptrend. As long as this trend stays an uptrend, this will be our macro uptrend. And if we zoom in a little bit further and just take into consideration this year, we look at 2025. Actually, 2025 is a down year. Let's get rid of that. We have 2025. The market tries to make new highs, but we have had lower highs ever since. So the question is, are we going to see the market actually come up and get above these last highs, or are we going to continue to see the market pushing down here for crypto? If we kind of zoom in a little bit further, we can see that the market was trending to the upside. The market was trending to the upside in April and topped out in May. And ever since, we've seen a lower high in June and a start of a downtrend here coming into late June. One thing I like to note is where potential areas of support and resistance might be. So we can see here, this was a, kind of draw it up here. This was a level of a little bit of support for the market. Once that was broken down, this market became resistance, or this level became resistance. So it looks like around, there's a little bit of a probe to the upside, but let's say 3.45. Actually, a little bit lower. Really, I'd say the key level here to look at is 3.35. The market can rally back up above 3.35, then the market could be back on top of this support. We can see support right here, turns into resistance, turns into support again. And the market is currently breaking down, and this level is now resistance. Okay. So key resistance, from what I can see right now, is going to be that $3.35 trillion level. We can make that a zone if we want to. There we go. $3.35 to 3.5. And then we have various levels of potential support as well. The nearest level of support, I would say, would be this area here. Basically from 3 trillion. Actually move this a little bit higher to 2.85 trillion. Okay. So I'm curious how the market is going to react in between these two key zones. We're going to continue to see bounces off this 3.01 trillion to 2.85 trillion zone, or if we're going to see rejections from the 3.35 trillion level. So kind of in this sideways market, the market is, if you're going to take one trend, it is a down trend. But if we look at some key moving averages, this pink one in particular, this is the 200 EMA. So the market has bounced off that 200. The 200, so the longer term trend is pointing up. But we have the 50, which is this green, the 50-day EMA, and the 20, which is the yellow, which is pointing basically sideways. So the midterm trend and short-term trend sideways, long-term trend from a moving average perspective is still pointing upward. So almost in this sideways market right now from a trend perspective. So not an easy market to be in. The market could be creating some sort of cup with handle pattern. Let me go ahead and draw it. This could be a potential bullish reversal pattern. So here we might see some sort of cup and potentially a handle formation on the right-hand side. That could be the low and the higher low for the market to potentially go upwards. But if we see this key support level broken down below, yes, there still could be demand down here, but that is going to be not as bullish, I would say. Because ideally we want to see in an uptrend, we want to see lows, higher lows, higher lows. Maybe this will be more prolonged, and maybe we'll get a higher low off of that longer term trend. We'll have to see. But the market's not macro bearish yet. It is still macro bullish. But like I said, we are trending downwards this year. And if we dive into Bitcoin, we can take a look at Bitcoin here. Bitcoin has just been consolidating sideways here. Basically between 111,000 to 101,000. Sloping down just a little bit, but holding high and tight. We'll have to see if Bitcoin does indeed decide to break to the upside. Actually, if we look at Bitcoin here, you can see here's major resistance for Bitcoin, kind of above that 106 level. Let me see here. Kind of above 106,000. Bitcoin is back above this, but the market has just been chopping straight through this level. So sideways market for Bitcoin, basically a sideways market for the total market as well. We take a look at ETH. ETH is very interesting right now. I'd say this would be one of the more interesting charts here. We have this big extension on the left here. And the market is just consolidated, and you can see ETH breaking down, retesting this level, and potentially breaking down again off the lows here. Or if we do bring, let's make this very conservative. We can make this consolidation as conservative as possible. And maybe we do have ETH actually coming into its consolidation again. But I'm definitely aware of this big imbalance in the market. Could ETH want to come all the way down here and balance this out at some point? Quite possibly. This is definitely a market that's sloping over. Starting to slope to the downside here. Are we going to get some rejection from ETH back to the downside? For those who don't know, the altcoin market is very much tied with ETH. If you see ETH bearish, it's not very likely that we're going to see altcoins very bullish. Another thing I like to look at is the equities market. A lot of times the equities market is going to give us some key data. If equities are bullish, then often crypto is bullish and vice versa. We can see here that the equities market has had this nice V-shaped recovery, but it is coming into a zone. I'm gonna show this here. What's this level? 6,088. So around 6,088. This is where big sellers came into the market. This candle right here specifically. You can see this big bearish candle. This is really where the market became very bearish for equities at 6,088. And we can see the market starting to push into this level. I'm curious if the market is going to sustain support inside here, or if we are going to see the market actually pull to the downside to some degree from here. So equities could be an area, a key resistance zone. Will that have an effect on crypto as well? We will have to see. One thing I like to look at is the dollar. So the dollar is often inversely correlated with cryptocurrency because people typically sell out of dollars to get into things like cryptocurrency or other assets. So I'm curious where the dollar is going to land. Let me go ahead and draw this up for us. There is a bullish zone here for the dollar coming around, say 96.8. Around 96.8, maybe the dollar is going to gravitate towards this area of support here. There has been a pretty weak dollar, the dollar crashing even further. That could be a bullish sign for the crypto markets. Also, I sometimes like to look at the VIX. The VIX is the volatility index for equities. A higher VIX means that the market is going to be bearish for equities, and a lot of times crypto is going to follow suit. You can see that the VIX is sitting at its trend line lows. Are we going to see some sort of bounce from the VIX to see maybe equities putting in some bearish pressure? Quite possibly. Or if this trend line breaks to the downside, that could be potentially bullish for equities. So we'll have to see, like I said, in the equities market. Investors might be curious to see if equities are indeed going to hold above this key sell zone, or if we are going to see a pullback in equities. The main thing I'd want to know if equities are going to hold this major trend, even if there is a pullback. If this trend holds, maybe the equities are just going to keep bouncing up and eventually breaking out. Maybe it's not going to be some sort of large pullback. Maybe that's going to be more of a symmetrical triangle formation. But if this trend line does get broken, maybe we're going to see something further to the downside. Let's go ahead and grab a retracement tool. Say this is the high. Quite possibly coming down if we want to see a golden zone retracement down to the 618. That could be a more sustained breakdown. And we can see right here, there's a little bit of an imbalance for my more advanced watchers. Right here, this little gap down around 5,300. So I'm definitely going to be aware of the equities market. I know this is a crypto market breakdown, but sometimes when I see something very key in the equity space, that is, like I said, equities often have some weight. You know, if people are selling equities, why would they be buying cryptocurrencies? At least now they're pretty correlated, but later equities might decorrelate with crypto. So going to be watching equities, also going to be watching ETH. I want to know if ETH is indeed going to roll back down, possibly clean up this imbalance. If ETH does decide to come down, again, this move could be a little bit substantial to the downside. From these levels just to this zone here, that's a 23% decline for ETH. And I think altcoins could follow. Another one that I like to look at in terms of whether we're going to see altcoins versus Bitcoin move is the Bitcoin dominance chart, just BTC.D. It's going to show you the percentage of the market that is Bitcoin. We can see right now that the percentage of the market that's Bitcoin is about 65, 66%. And a lot of times there is some resistance for Bitcoin kind of around that 71-ish area. Gonna find the most touches here around 71. I wonder if Bitcoin is going to Bitcoin dominance is still going to rally up to 71. If it does, that means more of the market is going to flow into Bitcoin and not into altcoins. But if we do end up seeing this market start to break down a little bit, just drawing a trend here, if we see the market starting to break down at all, that could be a good indicator that alts are potentially pushing up. Right here, very bullish for alts where the market pushed down. Over here, that was, sorry, right here in May, that was a bullish push for alts and so on and so forth. But back here, these are true altcoin seasons, like in May 2021, where Bitcoin really sold off compared to altcoins. Now, Bitcoin's a little bit of a different deal now that we have these Bitcoin ETFs. There are strategic Bitcoin reserves. Texas just signed in to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So there's a lot more buying of Bitcoin nowadays as a reserve asset than before. So this is possibly where we're going to continue to see Bitcoin dominance pushing up. Now, the last thing I'll look at is the altcoin market. So this chart here is called Total 3. Total crypto market excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. I like to remove Bitcoin and Ethereum because Bitcoin, like you saw, is 60, what is it? Bitcoin down, it's 65% of the crypto market. ETH is 10% of the crypto market. So if we take out Bitcoin and ETH, we can actually see everything else. We're looking at the weekly time frame, so we're over that 2-year trend line as well. You can see here, we just fit this trend line pretty nicely. Over the last 2 years, altcoins, even though they don't necessarily feel like it, have been bullish. And quite possibly, we are going to see altcoins maybe bounce off of this trend line once again. We dive a little bit deeper. You notice here was the last bounce for altcoins. There's some bulls that came in right here. We draw a rectangle across this level. Let's just say key support zone. We can see that the altcoin market did bounce off of this last area where bulls engaged. I wonder, say we draw a trend line here. I wonder if we actually see alts break above this trend line. Who knows what it might do? Maybe we might get some more chop here. We might actually hit this trend line, but actually seeing a break above this daily downtrend could be a good sign that the alt market might actually be reversing. But the good news is altcoins are starting to reach towards that trend line. However you want to draw it here. And if alts do bounce off of that trend line, that could be where alts start to make their next move to the upside. And of course, if that changes and alts actually break below this trend line, that's going to be something to look out for. There are some bullish demand zones for altcoins. That's, of course, areas where bounces can happen, but I'm always wary if the major trend line gets invalidated. So right now, just kind of in summary, the market has been just cooling off. It's been trending down slowly but surely. We're really not seeing any breakouts to the upside just yet for a lot of these markets, but that could change. Like we're seeing here for altcoins, the market is getting closer to that trend line. For the total crypto market, the market could be trying to make this cup with handle formation. We will have to see as the market starts to create the right-hand side of that smaller handle. But if this does break down, I would be looking for, if we see some sort of breakdown, I'd be looking for a potential bounce off of that major trend line. So that was a quick market update for you guys. Some of the things that we're looking at, a little bit of a boring market, but in these boring markets, I think it's good to actually get some perspective on some projects. There are some projects that also do perform even when the market is moving sideways. And those are ones to pay attention to. But wanted to give you a high level of what I see going on in the markets. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on the next one.